Ayman al-Zawahiri wants to set up the Al-Qaeda in India. How real a threat is this to you and me? Joining us on the center stage face-off tonight, three of India's foremost counter-terrorism experts. I want to begin by introducing Jaidev Ranade, former Additional Secretary in the Research and Analysis Wing, Ajay Sahani, who writes extensively on counter-terror, and also Praveen Swami, National Editor, Strategic and International Affairs at the Indian Express. I want to go across first to Ajay Sahani. Mr. Sahani, we've seen what al-Zawahiri has said. How real a danger do you believe the Al-Qaeda is to India, sir?
You see, this is just one more declaration of intent in a very, very long series of such declarations of intent since 1996. This is something that Osama bin Laden starts referring to as far as 1996, and there have been regular statements by Al-Qaeda saying India is going to be targeted, India will be targeted, calling upon Indian Muslims to rise against the oppression of Hindus, etc., etc. So I don't see this as being something radical or altering or transforming the security situation in this region at all. I think this is just more of the same, and they have failed in the past. I am fairly confident they will fail in future as well.
Al-Qaeda has tried and failed in the past. They will try and fail yet again. Ajit Ranade, is that your sense as well, Mr. Jaidev Ranade, or do you feel that this time the threat is more real because the Al-Qaeda is increasingly desperate and therefore that much more anxious to reach out and find Indian recruits, Mr. Ranade?
I think it's an upgrading of the threat. This video is like a recruitment pitch. They've alluded to an involvement, so-called involvement of theirs in the 26/11 incident, and now they've identified certain provinces where they suspect or where they calculate that there is a reservoir of sullen youth and whom they're going to try and exploit. So I think to that extent, this is a more serious development, and it signals to me at least an upgradation of the threat that has existed till now.
Two completely contrarian perspectives from our first two guests. I want to go across to Praveen Swami and see where he stands on whether or not this is a more significant threat than what we've seen from the Al-Qaeda in the past. Is it more of the same what we've seen previously, or do you believe that the Al-Qaeda this time is more anxious, more keen and more dangerous than before?
Right. Dr. Sahni is right that there's been a long history of similar threats, but I'm a little less sanguine than him for a couple of reasons. The first is that if you listen to the whole speech, the marketing pitch is mainly directed at potential recruits in Pakistan rather than in India. That's because Al-Qaeda has got its back to the wall in Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's got its back to the wall in the Middle East, it's got competition from ISIS, and it believes its best hope of survival is to draw as many cadre as possible and as much finance as possible to itself in Pakistan, where obviously the idea of waging war against India is quite emotive. Now, to do that successfully, they need to do something spectacular to demonstrate that they can do this jihad game better than the other guys in the business, like the Lashkar-e-Taiba or various other groups like the Jaish-e-Mohammed. And 9/11, they demonstrated their capacity to do very, very spectacular things. The second reason I'm a little apprehensive is in the last year we've seen an escalated flow of Indian nationals going to join jihadi groups overseas. We've seen some Indians going to Syria. We've seen a large number training with the Al-Qaeda affiliated Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in northwest Pakistan. Some of these people are known to have links with
you mentioned what the Al-Qaeda did with the 9/11 attack.
With Al-Qaeda.
But there's a big difference between the Al-Qaeda that was run by Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda that Ayman al-Zawahiri runs. And that's the question I want to put to Ajay Sahni. Do you sense at the core of this appeal competition between the Al-Qaeda on the one side and ISIS on the other over who is the bigger magnet for jihadi forces? Do you feel that the Al-Qaeda gets a sense that ISIS is penetrating deep into India and therefore, like you've got two companies going out into the market trying to poach, they're actually poaching for jihadis and there's competition between them?
You see, there is a competition, but I don't think it is something that is going to impact very dramatically on our security situation. The reality is the competition is in Iraq, Syria, where or in other parts of North Africa, in the other theaters of principal jihadi contestation at this juncture, where we see al-Qaeda is being progressively marginalized. Now, to think that they can, in this degraded state, suddenly create a new Indian empire is, I think, in the realm of fantasy rather than the realm of any operationally sort of reducible possibility. The other thing, I think Mr. Ranade said something that appears to be rather inaccurate. He said that they have now suddenly focused on new provinces which they've never done before. The 1996 statement by Osama bin Laden referred to Assam and Jammu and Kashmir. After 2002, every statement they have made has referred to Assam, Kashmir and Gujarat. So I don't see any sudden focus. In fact, if you read their statements in detail, their successive statements in detail, they don't even seem to have a very good idea of Indian geography, leave alone capacities for implementation of a terrorist attack.
Okay, I'll let Jaidev Ranade respond to what you're saying, because the two perspectives we are hearing from two leading experts are completely the opposite. Mr. Ranade, you heard what Ajay Sani just said. He says that the al-Qaeda doesn't even seem to fully understand Indian geography, and therefore to believe that they're very serious about trying to penetrate into India or know about how to go about doing it is inaccurate, sir.
I quite agree that their geography seems to be weak, but that doesn't mean that their intentions are not there. And as I said, this seems to be a recruitment pitch, and they are aiming to recruit youth here. The states that they've identified are the ones where they're going to do the targeting. So I think that we are going to notice a spurt in this so-called al-Qaeda chapters, India chapters activity. There's going to be more money being poured in, and they are going to work independently of the LET, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc.
Why has the ISIS succeeded in penetrating more successfully in India than the al-Qaeda? And are there any lessons from the ISIS model that the al-Qaeda would have learned, sir? Mr. Ranade?
I didn't get that. Could you repeat that, please?
Why has the ISIS been more successful than the al-Qaeda when it comes to recruiting in India? The al-Qaeda has been threatening or promising to recruit in India for many years unsuccessfully. We see now a lot of ISIS literature being translated into Urdu, Tamil, Pashto, Dari. Now that clearly indicates that ISIS has been able to build a local foothold, which the al-Qaeda is still struggling to do.
Certainly. I think firstly ISIS has much more money which they are pumping in. They are getting people to join them. There were reports of volunteers from here who wanted to go and assist in ancillary jobs helping ISIS cadres. The danger is, I think, not only the fact that they're recruiting them, but they're going to send them back, the trained cadres, and they're going to target the extremist groups which are already functioning in India. Al-Qaeda has now refocused on India, or focused on India rather, not refocused, focused on India, and it will work independent of the JEM, etc. Let's not forget that this Al-Qaeda chapter has two Pakistanis at the helm of affairs, which to my mind makes me suspect that they're going to work in tandem to some extent with the other groups.
Praveen Swami, do you believe that at the core of this new appeal is competition between the al-Qaeda and ISIS over who can recruit and penetrate more successfully in India?
Yes, absolutely. Not just India, I'd add, but in the larger jihadi stage. Look, after al-Qaeda's overwhelming success, from 98, 99 and on to 2001, Osama bin Laden became something of a, I don't know how to put this, but a jihadi rock star. He was a magnet for people within the movement, for financiers, and that mantle sort of gone to ISIS over the last year and a half. And they know they need to do something big to get that attention back. Competitions are the key of it. I just want to flag one little point. Al-Qaeda has actually been more successful in reaching out to Indians than ISIS. We have 6, 7, 8 cases of Indians going to fight in Syria. but we know that a large faction of the Indian Mujahideen, perhaps as many as 20 people, is training with an al-Qaeda affiliate in the Afghanistan-Pakistan borderlands. We know from the interrogation of Yassin Bhatkal that the Indian Mujahideen leadership itself had held meetings with al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. So I really wouldn't underplay this threat. It's true that, just by issuing a speech, no magic happens. There isn't going to be a war of colonization, that's going to overturn India. But I think Mr. Zawahiri knows that as well. What they will probably be planning to do is a spectacular act that puts them back on center stage. And I think we should be really, really worried about that.
In the last part of this broadcast, I want to come to what should India's response really be. And I put that question first to Ajay Sahni. Now that al-Qaeda has put out this threat, we also know that the ISIS is trying to penetrate and keep recruiting in India. What should Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Rajnath Singh be doing?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, please understand that India has fought successfully and contained Islamist terrorism supported by a nation state, its army and its intelligence agency for over 25 years. If you can fight and contain Pakistan-backed terrorism, you can certainly fight and contain the terrorism based on a ragtag bunch like the al-Qaeda, which is what it is now, and ISIS, which again probably will not be able to locate India on a map. So our response is, well, we have to strengthen our capabilities of fighting terrorism on our ground, which means improve your intelligence and your policing and enforcement capabilities. That is the only response that is going to help us neutralize this threat. And as long as these remain insufficient, as long as we are weak, we will be threatened by everything. When we are strong, we will be threatened by nothing.
Praveen Swami, what do you believe India needs to do to ensure that they're able to neutralize the latest threat from the al-Qaeda?
I agree with Dr. Sahni that enhancing police and intelligence capacities is key, and I would very much like to see from this government, which has expressed verbal support for this idea, a roadmap of how it intends to do it over the next 5 years. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight or just by throwing money at the problem. I'd also say, though, that the real danger to me comes from the possibility that some numbers of young, angry Indian Muslim youth will be drawn to the cause, larger numbers than have been in the past. There's already, if you look at Islamist fora, jihadi fora, internet chat, substantial numbers of young people who are worried that some sort of communal apocalypse lurks around the corner. And I think Prime Minister Modi's ability to ensure that communal tensions are managed, to ensure that he reins in people on the fringes of his movement, and to build an inclusive polity to make sure that everyone has a fair shot at our growing economy. I think these things are also going to be important. I'd love to see our politicians be discussing issues of inclusiveness and participation. Sadly, they haven't done it for 30 years, and I worry a little bit that they're not going to be able to manage this part of the challenge now.
The communal pot is stirred in Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka and elsewhere, that there is a greater fear that the level of disillusionment in the minority community will go up, thereby creating a bigger gene pool of potential jihadis, Mr. Anand.
I think there has to be some effort or more of an effort at perception management. That's what I would call it. And a stress on inclusion of the various groups into governance. Having said that, I would go with what Ajay Sahni said and add two more points. One is that we must monitor much more closely the flow of money coming into these various extremist groups or the fringe groups. And secondly, we have to speed up the trials and justice in terrorist cases, because otherwise each person arrested is like a ticking time bomb for an attack or an attempt to try and get him released.
Okay, I'm going to leave it over there. To my guests for joining me tonight, Ajay Sahni, Jaydev Ranade and Praveen Swami, thank you very much. India clearly cannot overreact, cannot go into a state of panic, but it cannot afford to sit back and pretend that this threat is insignificant or that it doesn't matter.